They met as kids. They started off as neighbors. They soon became friends. For a while, they became something more, until they weren't. But they remained close, and years later when they reunited, old feelings reemerged. So are they destined to find love, or will they just remain close friends? Hello everyone, I'm Jack Fisher and welcome to my world. And being a longtime fan of romance, I like to think that I can assess a fictional romance better than most. And for most romantic subplots, I don't need to watch an entire movie or TV series to know if their love is real, fake, or bland. But for some couples, I honestly don't know. And of all the fictional romances I followed over the years, few have confounded me more than Connie and Bobby from King of the Hill. This is one of those romantic subplots that drops plenty of hints and undertones, but other times it feels like two kids stumbling their way through adolescent hormones. That certainly makes for some funny and memorable moments, but in a romantic sense, Connie and Bobby's story is incomplete. And with the 2025 revival, that story is now continuing. Bobby clearly still has feelings for Connie, and she clearly harbors some feelings for him too. But how deep do those feelings run? Is it really a foundation for a lasting love? Or are these just the kind of feelings that work best as an endearing friendship? Those are difficult questions to answer, but with more seasons of the King of the Hill revival in the works, they are worth exploring. Now, I followed King of the Hill for its entire original run. I remember the episode when Connie and her family first moved to Rainy Street. I watched Connie and Bobby bond over the course of multiple seasons. It didn't start out as romantic. At times, there really wasn't much chemistry between them. Connie was this smart but very sheltered child. Her parents constantly pushed her to be the best at everything. Anything less than an A+ for her is considered failure. But despite these lofty standards, Connie really put in the work. She always rose to the occasion. And even when her parents weren't pushing her, she proved to be very self-motivated. By contrast, Bobby is more of a free spirit. He's not exceptionally smart or driven. There are also times when he lets bad influences affect him, whether it comes from Bill Dauterive or the kids at school. But at his core, he has a good heart. He enjoys making people laugh. And he proves over the course of the show that he has better social skills than most. So much so that he drew attention from multiple girls. But none of those relationships ever went anywhere. Connie remained a constant in his life, regardless of what Bobby was dealing with. He often played a similar role with her, acting as a counter to her parents' controlling nature. And as the show progressed, Connie and Bobby's dynamic evolved, albeit in a chaotic sort of way. There were times when you could really sense that these two cared about each other, but there were also times when those feelings lacked depth. Now, a big part of that was because they were kids still trying to make sense of the world around them. We really couldn't expect a couple of middle schoolers to grasp what it meant to be in love. But at the same time, they were at an age when close friendships became every bit as influential as family bonds. Bobby was the first friend Connie had when she moved to Arlen. She was also the friend he often needed. Before her, his only other friend was Joseph. And while those two offered plenty in terms of antics and misadventures, Connie offered something different. She was smart, studious, and diligent, all traits that Bobby lacked. Yet despite these stark differences, they always got along. They liked being around each other. Naturally, that never sat well with Connie's parents, Con and Min, but that only strengthened their connection in the long run. Over the course of the show, Bobby and Connie shared some fairly romantic moments. At one point, they even became official, calling one another boyfriend and girlfriend. Sure, it didn't last. They eventually did break up, but they still remained close friends. And when the show first ended, that was where they stood. Even when I go back and watch the episodes that focused on Connie and Bobby, I really couldn't tell you what their endgame is. I certainly could imagine a scenario where they do eventually get together, but I can just as easily imagine them remaining friends while pursuing other romantic interests. It's not that they lack romance, they're just so different in how they carry themselves. Bobby's goofy, outgoing, and sociable. Connie is diligent, structured, and driven. These really aren't trivial differences, but they're not intractable barriers either. People with vastly different quirks can still be friends, and they can fall in love. And when the show first ended, there wasn't even a tease that they would eventually get together. But then the 2025 revival came along, and that complicated things even more, but in a good way. Flash forward 8 years, both Connie and Bobby are at very different points in their lives. Connie is in college pursuing a life of academics, just like she did in her youth. But Bobby followed a fairly different path, opting to skip college entirely to become a professional chef at a fusion restaurant. We still don't know much about what happened in the interim years. It is implied that Bobby and Connie lost touch at some point, but they never had a falling out or anything overly dramatic. Their lives just took them in very different directions. When they meet up in the first episode of the revival, it's clear that they still care for each other, but only Bobby seems interested in pursuing something more. That does lead to a fair amount of drama, as well as some genuinely funny moments. But in terms of whether they're meant to be friends or something more, that remains unclear. In some respects, the dynamics between them have totally flipped. Bobby's social skills have only gotten better with age. Being a young, confident man in his 20s, complete with a career and no student loan debt, he attracts plenty of female attention. By contrast, Connie's perspective on love and relationships don't seem very healthy. But that's not because she pursues ethical non-monogamy in dating Chane Wasana-san. Her situation still feels like a byproduct of her parents' controlling nature. Even though she's in college, they still keep pushing her to be with Chang. Not because they actually care about each other, but because it's good for both of their families. Chane is the guy Connie's parents want her to be with. Connie is the girl Chane's parents want him to be with. Chang seems completely ambivalent to the situation, only caring about what he can get from Connie, be it sex or approval from his parents. He never comes off as likable in the slightest, and he makes no effort to be a good partner to anyone. And when Bobby asks whether Connie actually cares about him, she deflects. Because for her, being with Chane is just a facade to appease her parents. It's not at all romantic, but it is pragmatic. That's what matters to her initially. And towards the end of the first season, after things between Chane and her parents completely collapse, she and Bobby do make an effort to rekindle things. They try dating again, but even on that front, there's still this disconnect between them. They quickly realize that they're not kids anymore. They've grown up in different ways. They follow different paths. Is there really a foundation for a deeper love here? That's a question they both seem to struggle with. It even makes sense, given that they're still relatively young and maturing in different ways. But they're also clearly drawn to one another by circumstance and passion. That ends up manifesting hilariously at a hospital while Connie is recovering from a broken arm, doped up on painkillers and without her usual reservations. She flat out tells Bobby that she loves the man he's become. She's not just fixated on the fun, goofy boy she was friends with all those years ago. In some ways, she's envious of him. Bobby knew what he wanted to do with his life, and he did it. No expensive college courses, no pressure from his parents, just drive, vision, and dedication. Now granted, you can chalk some of her words up to the effects of the drugs. But even if Connie wasn't in a sober mindset, that doesn't make what she said any less true. Bobby even seems to understand that, and he does not take advantage of the situation as a lesser man might have. He just acknowledges that if he and Connie are going to be together, they have to figure out if the adult versions of themselves can make it work. And with more seasons of King of the Hill in the works, it's likely we'll see this relationship evolve even more. Even with the prospect of Connie and Bobby connecting as adults, I'm still not sure they'll ultimately end up together. They do seem to be on that path at the moment, but a lot can change. Bobby and Connie are very different in terms of personality. They're also at very different points in their lives. Bobby knows what he wants, but Connie seems locked into being a good student. She clearly has an interest in science and math, but she doesn't seem to know what life she's going to pursue after college. That's a situation that's very common to many young people who excel in college, but don't know how to translate that into a career. There's certainly a chance that Connie's ambitions may lead her somewhere else, and Bobby may not be able to go with her. There's also the fact that Bobby is somewhat locked into his current career as a chef. Even though he loves what he does, he's still at the mercy of Chane's father. He does not have the luxury of uprooting his life or transitioning into something else, nor would he want to. That may very well be the biggest challenge that Connie and Bobby face, aligning their circumstances with their desires. And even if they can be together, they still might ultimately work better as friends. It's clear that dynamic was still present when they reconnected. It might just be a matter of finding out how deep it goes. Where that eventually leads, I still don't know. King of the Hill is unique in how it doesn't restrict itself to traditional tropes. It's not afraid to mix things up and do things differently. Whether Connie or Bobby end up as friends or go on to get married, that's all still up in the air. The history of their connection has always been complicated, but that's exactly what makes it so compelling. These two could be the best of friends or a love for the ages. But me being a fan of romance, I'm honestly rooting for Bobby and Connie to find love. I truly believe it would be a beautiful thing, I tell you what. Thanks for watching, everyone, and thanks for joining me in my world. Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe, and until next time, take care and stay safe.